Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, grateful for who you are, being our God, for giving us purpose in our lives, and thank you that we have these bonds with each other because of Jesus, all because of Jesus, that we're here, and we wouldn't be here without him. Pray just, well, thank you for the Longs for being here, Jim and Lindsay for taking time to talk to us, and I pray that we can have open minds, open hearts, open ears to hear what you have to say. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So,
Is it all right that we're on our phones?
yeah, we put all our notes on our phones.
That's
Sorry.
It's 2022.
We're old. So the topic as we understand it was about what it looks like to journey with a spouse or a family member or friend, maybe through mental health challenges, and then also or addiction. So one of the things that we in any kind of situation where we're talking about how to help other people, how to journey with them, is that we're always concerned about the person that's offering the help, right? That we can get so focused on the people that need help and all that stuff that a lot of, you can get really burned out. So I've got a quote from a guy called Bernard of Clairvaux. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He's from the 1500s. And he said, "The man or woman who is wise, therefore, will see his life as more of a reservoir than a canal. The canal simultaneously pours out what it receives. The reservoir retains the water till it's filled, then discharges the overflow without loss to itself. Today, there are many in the church," this was in the 1500s, "there are many in the church who act like canals. The reservoirs are far too rare. You too must learn to await this fullness before pouring out your gifts. Do not try to be more generous than God." I love that quote. I love the idea of the reservoir that you give out of an overflow. So as just kind of keeping that thought, Lindsay's going to talk about the mental health piece, or if you had some more intro remarks you wanted to make.
Well, we talked about when you are journeying with somebody, most of us, you come to a place of pursuing healing. So most journeys through addiction, through mental health, can start with a place of pursuing healing. And that may be healing for the person who's involved in the addiction or who has a mental illness. And that may be the person who is spouse or friend or in relationship with somebody who's in addiction or has mental illness, pursuing healing for themselves as they journey with somebody, right? It's going to look different for everybody. And nobody can tell you how to journey what healing is going to look like for you or for that person. It's challenging if the person who is suffering from addiction doesn't want to pursue getting sobriety, or doesn't see their need yet. Even more important for the person who's in a relationship with them to seek help, right? It's important to educate yourself on what addiction is, what that looks like. Educate yourself with resources that are out there that will provide help. Somebody who's an alcoholic, Al-Anon. But your own soul care, so you can become that reservoir, is important. And I think Jesus modeled that for us. And how many times did he go off to a quiet place to pray? How many times did he take just the disciples and go off and be with his friends? You know, he often often withdrew to the wilderness, often withdrew to those quiet places. Sometimes when you're journeying through challenging life circumstances with somebody, we don't always know what our own soul care, what that means, what that's going to look like. Some of us can feel overly responsible for helping somebody, you know, and that puts an extra burden on it. It's not necessarily always the appropriate response. So some of those those different practices that give yourself the space, silence, solitude, Bible meditation, some of those is kind of a realm that we've been really enjoying learning about the last few years. It's brought a lot of life to us and really deepened our walks with God, which has been life-giving, and has helped. We've got quite a few people that we're journeying with right now who are in challenging situations with spouses, you know, and who are journeying with friends who have suffered a lot of loss, hard loss, friends who are going through mental illness. We both come from our own backgrounds of dealing with addiction. I grew up with an alcoholic mom and had no idea, no language for what taking care of myself in that looked like. It was all about her, and what I wasn't getting from her, what she couldn't give. I had no understanding what I could expect from her, you know, what was realistic to expect.
I want to talk about the healing part with that, and I think, you know, however we were formed, right, if you think about that, which is our experiences and our choices, our environment, as well as, you know, things that we've been involved in. I think many times if you're in the position where you're trying to journey with someone and help somebody, there will be things that come up in your past that maybe you're not sure what that's really about. You know, it could have been, you could have been brought up in a great church, but there were still things that come up. Maybe unrealistic expectations, maybe, you know, pressure that it wasn't really coming, you didn't think of it as pressure, but expectations can be, there can be a lot of pressure with expectations. And learning, you know, growing up, trying to live up to everybody's expectations, there's some harm that comes about that. It's not irredeemable, but that. So when you begin to have relationships with and get into helping other people, sometimes things will come up and it's like, why do I feel that way? Or what is that? That's bringing up an old memory in mind. You know, what's that about? Right. And so when Lindsay was talking about healing, it's the idea that there might be isolated incidents that may be, it could be traumatic events, or it could be death by 1,000 cuts of things that you need to figure out how to bring those back to God. And Jesus is continuing to do what he did when he was on earth, and that's heal the brokenhearted and set the captive free, right? That's what he does. And so it might mean a part of your soul care is seeking wholeness. Like there's something, this feeling or this thing just keeps coming up over and over again. And pay attention to that. And begin to seek resources that talk about healing. That's something that we hope that the church will talk about more. We're hearing more of it now, but really pursuing emotional, spiritual, all kinds of healing that needs to happen. So, pick it up from there on whatever you have next.
Yeah, I think in our pursuit, our soul care, our pursuit of healing, if we're in a situation with somebody that we're journeying with them, to educate ourselves about whatever it is their issue is. If it's mental illness, am I jumping ahead?
No, good.
If it's mental illness, learn about whatever the diagnosis is, if that's appropriate, especially if you're a spouse of somebody, or sibling, or parent, so that you know, that helps you manage your expectations. You know, it helps you to learn to journey with somebody, not to fix. That's not, we can't fix. That's the work that God does, that's the work that professionals do, that's not to put on us, right? But also with the soul care, our own care, we want to be able, and in addiction, educating yourself about addiction. There are going to be different expectations, you know, if you're journeying with and in relationship with somebody who's addicted to something. You know, it's not the same as mental illness. There are different, what each person can do is going to be different.
Do you want to speak to that person that told you what their spouse is doing, like the specifics?
Yeah, so we're walking with somebody who's in going through some significant mental illness issues right now, and they've talked about. I asked the other day, just like, what are some things that your spouse has done that have been meaningful, that have helped you, because they're in a space of, you know, they've been great. They feel supported by them. They don't feel judged. They don't feel shamed. They don't feel pushed. Their spouse is really walking alongside them. They've taken up a lot of the load that this person just can't manage right now.
Sure.
So fixing meals, taking care of things in the house, really taking care. They were also talking about their spouse being somebody who is just devoted to staying strong in their relationship with God, praying together, but praying in a way of being positive and encouraging, and letting the spouse know that they are loved, they are supported, and they are with them. You know, they're not feeling any, and they're kind of riding on their spouse's faith. The person who's got the struggle just is feeling very faithless and very dark right now. You know, that's a really hard place to be. It's a hard place to be as a spouse, to watch somebody that you love be in that place. But they're doing everything to support, be present, to care. And so it's helping. That in itself, that presence and that care, sometimes the best thing we can do, like some people that we know talk about, I think it's Henry Nouwen said, sometimes the biggest need is just your care for people.
Right.
Not fixing, not anything you can do, but just your presence, and you're caring through your presence. Yeah.
So if I'll speak a little bit more about the addiction piece, and I think that doesn't take much to look around and see how there are, you know, there's a lot of addiction. There's, you know, it can be alcohol, it can be other drugs, it can be pornography, it can be gambling, it can be food, it can be about anything. And I think specifically because of alcohol and other drugs, and I'm going to put vaping in there, because I think what I've seen with a lot of people is they try to replace vaping, but then they end up putting drugs in the vaping tools, you know. But I think it's, if you're in a relationship with somebody, especially a close family relationship or a spouse relationship, I think it's important to first seek help for yourself, right? So not in any kind of shaming way or anything, but there's a reason why you're connected with that person. There's communication skills or patterns, there's forming early childhood forming or something that's made it seem like a really good idea to be connected to that person, you know, as a spouse or family member you don't really have a choice about. But but I think, and I try to say this whenever I talk about like Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous, it's important to understand that AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, does not help people. Their mission is not to help people not drink, right? their mission is to help people become the kind of people that don't use alcohol to manage their lives. So that's more of a transformation from the inside out. And when you look at the steps to admit that you can only do it with God and everything, they're very spiritual steps. They're actually out of the Bible. They just didn't tell the people in AA that, because those people had been beaten over the head with the Bible most of their lives. So they just didn't tell them where it came from. And I think the same thing for Al-Anon, which is the organization for people that are spouses or family members of addicts, that Al-Anon will teach you how to manage your life without the other person managing it, their addiction managing it. So it's an inward transformation inside out, because when we don't have appropriate boundaries, we're actually not loving people the way we need to, or the way we could. And that actually can prolong their addiction. It's not your fault, but it gets you into a cycle with that person that's unhealthy for you and unhealthy for them. So it's always, and the message to somebody in addiction never needs to be stop using. It needs to be seek help. You need help. If you could have done this on your own, you would have already done it. Sure. So you need to seek help. But then the person that's in that relationship also needs to seek help. To be heard, to have a place, to learn how to set appropriate boundaries, so that, and it's really part of your own soul care, or your growth toward wholeness in that. So.
And if we're in a relationship with somebody who's addicted, our seeking help is not conditional on whether they're getting help or not, right? It's important in either for mental illness or addiction to have people that you feel safe with, have a good support system. You know, it's not just everybody and their brother who's going to be able to journey with you in a way that is needed, right? So you want to be wise and discerning about who those people are, but you want people who can journey with you, who can support you, whether you're the addict or whether you're getting help. You know, that's really important for everybody to have those relationships with people who will support you.
And I think it's really important that we don't limit that that help to inside the church. I know we led chemical recovery for a long time, but we've come to see that was good for a season. But I really can't argue with the success of AA and Al-Anon and helping people. And I think as disciples, as apprentices of Jesus, it's really good to sit back and listen to other people sometimes, especially in those groups. Now, sometimes you have to visit several before you find one that's a good fit. But I think that those recovery programs, whatever they might be, can be very, very helpful in uncovering maybe a lot of spiritual issues, maybe things that you need to seek healing on, or you need to seek help on from God to really transform from the inside out. So I think I'm going to be sure and say that. So that looks like everything.
You want to read what we put down there?
Where?
The first.
Oh, this?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So of course, one of the things that we think about in 1 Corinthians 13 is where Paul is writing about love. One of the things that we've talked about a lot recently is that you don't want to turn 1 Corinthians 13 into a to-do list, right? Because that will just make you mad. It'll just make you really sad and shamed, and it's like this some standard to-do list of things that you can live up to, because honestly, God is love. Now, love is not God, but God is love. So when we talk about soul care, when we talk about really putting yourself in a position of experiencing God more, then one of the fruits of that is love. And so when in 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul's talking about love is long-suffering, I think that that's probably the key to the things that we're talking about tonight, is to, if I could rephrase it, to put yourself in a situation so that you're filling yourself up with God in such a way that that long-suffering overflows onto other people. You're not going to be able to grit your teeth. You're not going to be able to gin it up. You're not going to be able to psych yourself up with positive thinking. That's not, if you just do loving things, you'll drive yourself and everybody else crazy. But
you go into burnout. And
yeah, all those things that you're talking about, yeah. But if you're experiencing, and I will give a plug to one of our favorite books about love, it's called Surrender to Love by a guy named David Benner. And he's just this renowned psychologist who's written a lot. But Surrender to Love, it really talks about how to receive God's love maybe differently than you have received it so far. No, it is for us. And it's, again, that reservoir that then you can turn around and flow in and overflow onto other people. Do you want to read that? Or?
Just what we were talking about, 1 Corinthians. I mean, one of the ways I like to read 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 4, because God is love, is to put God in place of where love is. So it says, God is patient, God is kind, and is not jealous. God does not brag. God is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, does not seek his own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. God never fails. I'm going to keep reading.
Yeah, that's probably. They're probably.
It's just nice to put that in your head and just know that that's who God is.
That's God.
Yeah.
That's great.
So
we can open it up for questions if you guys have any, or if we've communicated everything perfectly.
Kind of throw everything out at you. Hi, how do you?
Yeah, it would be overwhelming.
Sit down.
Out of information. Yes.
Yeah, what was the name of that organization? Not AA, but the other one.
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon. I've never heard of that. So that helps people that are like close relationships with
Family members, spouses.
Okay.
Yeah, people
Right.
who are in relationship with somebody who's in addiction.
And so so basically it's a group meeting, and they do, how does like a meeting go? Do they just talk, just share?
Well, they,
what's going on?
like in AA has a big book. Al-Anon has another book. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but
It's called Al-Anon.
yeah, just call it Al-Anon. But they may read, there are different steps to recovery. Like their philosophy is that Al-Anon helps people recover from being addicted to the addict, right? Because, you know, when someone's in an unhealthy relationship with an addict, then you'll do all kinds of things. You'll cross all kinds of boundaries. You'll say I would never do that, and you do it. I'm never going to give them any more money, but you do it. A wife might call, you know, the husband comes in the night before drunk, can't get up the next day. She calls in and says her husband's sick, you know, instead of, so, you know, taking that responsibility for somebody. So in Al-Anon, you learn what's going on with you in all of that, and to learn how to develop healthy boundaries with somebody that ultimately will help them seek help.
Sometimes those setting boundaries can feel, it's hard. It can feel like it's not loving.
Right.
Yeah.
It can look that way. Yeah.
And so they help, and it's so good to listen to other people's stories too, and hear what other people have been through, and you can just glean things that have helped others. Codependency is the other term for somebody, you know, Al-Anon is a group deals with people who are in codependent relationships, unhealthy responsibility. But so learning that, setting those boundaries is important. It's healthy for you, and it's the best thing for the addict as well, you know?
Sure. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Thank you, Lindsay, for
Yeah,
taking
thanks.
the time, because I know that this is, a sensitive subject, and it's not, widely broadcast, on stage and different things. But coming from a situation where I was in a relationship with someone with mental health challenges, the general convention or the general thought was that you would seek help within the church, right? Because they have the same, fundamental beliefs and so on and so forth. Is that beneficial, or is that still, the first go-to, or are you more advocating to just get the help that you need versus trying to search deliberately for someone in there?
So I want to be sure I understand. So you're asking, so if someone has a mental health challenge and they are seeking help?
No, you as a person.
Right.
To sort of deal with the, to
Right.
get the help that you're describing.
Right. I think that there are probably some good resources, people that are, that have been trained in that.
Right.
I don't know if with any kind of therapy, having had therapy myself, the biggest thing about any kind of therapy is how kind of what's the word I'm looking for? If you gel with somebody, or kind of the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, chemistry. And so I think generally in any kind of Christian counseling, people that are trained professionally, that maybe have a master's of social work and MSW, that are claiming that say out front that they are Christian counseling. I think that I wouldn't limit myself just to people in the church.
Okay.
I think that would maybe limit the people that you would have the chemistry with. And also I think sometimes boundaries can be crossed if you're in the same group and you see them outside, that sometimes healthy boundaries would be better if they weren't in that group. But but that's just something that I would consider now, is because it's all about the chemistry.
Sure. And getting the person the help that they can use.
Right.
Yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's good.
It's a good question.
What do you think, well, for both of y'all, what do you think is, I guess, some of the biggest mistakes when somebody that's trying to help somebody with a mental health issue, like you don't have it, but like you're trying to support. What do you think the biggest problems that people do usually?
Common pitfalls.
I think the biggest thing is, out of the best hearts, the best intentions, we can rush into fix. I think sometimes we can take on too much responsibility to now I have to be there all the time. There are healthy boundaries to set, not just with addiction, but to set with somebody who's in, the midst of a mental illness as well. They may look different, but I think that's the biggest challenge, is to take on too much responsibility. You can't fix somebody. We are not licensed counselors or therapists to, tell somebody what they should be doing. So I ask a lot of questions. This particular person that we kind of are walking through is doing a program, so I'm asking what they're learning in their program, and just listening, doing a lot more listening. I certainly will have things in my head and opinions about why are they doing that? That doesn't sound, but that's not my place to jump in and start offering
Sure.
a bunch of advice about things that they can do. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? You know? So I don't know like specifically, but I think that's the thing that we just want so much to help.
Right.
We care
Yeah.
and don't want to see people suffer.
Right.
So it's a real sacred space to learn how to join somebody in their suffering.
Right. I think to add to that, it goes right along with what Lindsay was saying. But if you're not rushed into fix, you also need to manage your own expectations about how long somebody's going to be, maybe in a depression, or if it's something different where they actually need medication to balance. And that's where getting help for yourself, because there are support groups for people who are family members of people that have mental health issues. You know, many times, I mean, you could call about any kind of mental facility that helps people with mental illness and say, hey, listen, I'm just a family member. Are there some resources that you can point me towards? And so that you're coming from a place of being knowledgeable, about that. But even equally, if not more than that, I think, and I think this is something that can really challenge us at a fundamental level, is that there's a part of me that believes that sending that text, sending that email, making that phone call, setting that appointment is somehow more powerful than praying for somebody. It's like I catch myself, I'm thinking about this person, I need to send them a text. And really, what does that say about my worldview or God view, really? Is that what if I took a minute in a contemplative way, and really took a minute to pray, and this is a good prayer, and Lindsay had really articulated this, and so I've lived on it now for a couple of years, is how can I join God in what he's already doing with this person? Because if Jesus said, my Father's always at work, then maybe God is always at work. And so instead of doing something and then asking God to bless my action, perhaps I should find out what God wants me to do. And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just provide space for God to do what he's doing. Sometimes it is just an encouraging text or something like that. But I think that my first reaction or response should always be, how can I bathe this situation in prayer? What does that look like? And something I heard a couple of months ago, I was listening, and this guy that was speaking said, do you think that Jesus could have fixed Peter right before Peter denied him? Do you think he could have given him lockjaw? Yes, but he didn't. He prayed for Peter. And I mean, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, Jesus thought that praying was better than doing something at that point. So puts us in a very different posture. About the whole thing.
And allowing that person to go through it, to wrestle through it and learn from it. That's really deep.
I have a question. Thanks so much for everything you shared. I was in a conversation recently, this is like outside of our relationship or family, just with someone who basically was struggling with mental illness, and her experiences with other disciples were often like, pray about it, seek God. And I think I've heard that before, where that response of like, hey, take it to God, can come across in a way that's dismissive.
Yes.
And so how do you like I think about my relationships with people who are suffering, who either want to know God or don't. Like, I feel like my first response is like I want you to be close to God. But how do you intertwine like your longing to see someone be healed by God, but like showing caution, because like that can sound dismissive to people when that's not what totally fixes everything. So I think I felt before confused and like, how do I like infuse faith into this relationship? Did that question make sense?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Are you thinking something?
Yeah, I need a couple more minutes to think. Go ahead.
I think what Jim shared about us praying, we can intercede and pray for those people.
Yeah.
But if they're not, and whether they are or not, I think you're right. It can be a very dismissive thing. And sometimes it's paying attention to, is it my own discomfort that's coming up that I don't know what to do with this person? It's a lot coming at me right now. You know, I mean, people in different places can sort of, I think Jim had shared earlier, those expectations put on us can be a lot. It's really that learning to journey with, I like to ask a lot of questions. Is this something you feel comfortable telling me more about? How can I be a friend to you in this? You know?
Yeah.
That's good.
What do you think you need? What? Just kind of listening to the space that they're in, giving them a safe space to talk. I don't know.
I think
Not being the dismissive thing, because I don't, you know, especially if somebody's in a crisis or suffering from a mental illness, and you know, just God can feel very far away,
Exactly.
right? That can be a very dark place. So I don't think that's a real helpful.
No, that's super good.
You know?
Well, I think too with someone like that, because I think our intent. I mean, we know that an interactive, ongoing relationship to God is ultimately the thing that is going to make someone whole, right? But if they're in a dark place, I mean, you are Jesus to them, right? And then if I kind of flip that, and even when Jesus, the hardest night of Jesus's life, he asked 3 friends just to be with him. And we heard this recently. This woman brought this point up, and it just blew me away. She said it was probably the only time that Jesus ever asked for anything for himself. Was in the garden. Just keep watch with me. And they couldn't. They fell asleep. But I think sometimes just that whole, it sounds like kind of an old concept, but keeping watch with someone, to just be there. I mean, that's what Job really needed his friends to do, was just to shut up and be with him. And they messed that up. You know, I think someone like, I can tell when you're talking about how much compassion you have and how much you love them or care for them or hurt for them, the empathy that you have. And I think sometimes just your presence, we would call it the gift of presence, right? Of just being there and having a cup of coffee or sitting there on a park bench and not talking. And know that God is working in that. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, Lindsay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well,
Yeah.
So, Lindsay, you said the word journey, and when I think journey, like you're going somewhere together. You're traveling same time, same place. You're with that person, and like watching, like you're there for that person, and so I think that's good, I guess, imagery for me, just to be a help to somebody, not necessarily like doing this, and this, but just presence, like you said, the gift of presence. I think that can be really powerful and really helpful.
I was just going to share, because
I battle with depression. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, about just keep praying. Because that's like one of the most discouraging things people have said to me just during that time. Because, of course, I know, you know, that I'm longing to be close to God, but it's so hard. And I'm normally just like so out of it mentally that I can't, you know? So, and a lot of times, I know this is not for everyone, but a lot of times, like, it's so hard to pray. Do I know why I have? No, I don't. But it is, and it's hard to physically open my Bible, and it's not that I don't want to. There's just some kind of mental block there, and it just fills me with anxiety. And I think it might just be because I know that when I open the Bible, there's going to be all these things I'm not doing right. Or like all these emotions I want to feel, but I can't feel them right now because I'm just so, like, for me, I'm so numb normally during that time. So one of the best questions I've been asked by a friend, and I've only been asked once, is what can I do to help you when you are depressed? I've only been asked one time by one friend. And that was super helpful to me. Like, it made me cry because I was like, oh, no one's ever asked me that before.
Wow.
And it wasn't necessarily something that was, like, I didn't have this long list. I was just like, please text me even if I don't respond. Like, it encourages me, but I might not have like the strength or emotional capacity to actually have a conversation with you. But a text knowing that I'm on somebody's mind, that I'm not forgotten, like, that can be really encouraging. Or give me a hug even if I don't look approachable. It just depends. Like, not everybody's gonna feel that way, but for me, physical touch reminds me that you know, people care and they're there. You know what I'm saying? So, like, asking that, and even if they don't have an answer at the moment, just saying, like, you know, think about it, let me know, because I would really like to be there for you during those times. I think that has been one of the most encouraging questions someone has asked me. But yeah, presence is huge. Like, he's really good. He's gotten really good during my times of being depressed. Like, taking things off my load is super helpful. Like, he is amazing. I don't do much around the house, but when I'm depressed, I really don't do like the one thing I'm supposed to do. So just patience is huge. Like, not expectation, not expecting what's normal of the person, but still wanting to be around them. Like, for me, a big thing is I can feel like I'm just a Debbie Downer. Like, I don't want to hang out with anyone because I'm just going to bring them down. But when people are still like, no, I still want to hang out, even if we don't talk, like, let's watch a movie, or we could just play a game, or we can just sit in silence, you know, but I think that can be really helpful. So I really appreciate everything you guys have said tonight. It's made me feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for trusting us.
Yeah.
With that, thank you. And it was what I was gleaning was, I should not make assumptions that I know what they need. I should ask them. You know, and I know a friend of mine who struggles with depression. They said, you know, just call me and talk about football, even if it's not football season. Just talk to me about football, because I can do that even when I'm in a deep depression. I can talk about football.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like small things, like, let's just go get tacos tonight. I'll start bawling. Like, okay, I didn't want to cook. I'm so tired. Like, the smallest thing can just make a huge difference.
That's so good.
I think you were saying that it made me think of, so many of us don't know how just to be with each other. So much of what we've learned and stuff is all about the doing, to do something. So it's an interesting space to learn to just sit and be, sit and watch a movie, sit and, you know, offer that, just be Jesus for each other and sit in silence, pay attention to ourselves, you know. It can make us uncomfortable, but.
Something else that helps a lot too is, like, because spiritually, because during those times I'm so numb, just all around, is he'll ask me, do you want to pray? And I'll say yes or no. Normally it's no. And he'll say, well, do you want me to pray just me for you, for us? And I'm like, okay, yeah. Once it takes the pressure off of me having to give like an outpouring of energy, it makes it a lot easier to like, and I normally end up being like, oh, that was really nice, but I didn't have to be the one thinking of what am I going to say next, or what do I want to pray about, that kind of thing. So that from a spiritual angle in a marriage, that's been really helpful. Or like he'll send me a scripture, like a short one. Don't send the whole book. But he'll send me like a short one-liner. And it really is what you guys were saying earlier. Like, I really am, during those times, I'm like riding the wave of his spirituality, because that's what keeps me afloat. My mom told me a long time ago, I'll never forget it. She was talking about how in a marriage, both people are going to have spiritual ups and downs. And we're both going to have our time. Because I was feeling guilty of like, I feel like I'm always riding on his coattails spiritually. And she was telling me, she was just like, I mean, he's going to eventually need you too. Like right now he's up and you're down, but it will be the opposite and you will balance each other out. Absolutely. That's the beauty of marriage. So
yeah,
it's been cool.
We've said from the get-go, we've always had this thing of, you know, we're both going to have our times of crazy and need and stuff like that. We're just not allowed to have it at the same time.
We gotta synchronize it.
Right.
Our kids may have had a different perception of all that. No, they're both nuts, you know. So.
But that's definitely.
Lastly, because we all come from the product of our choices and experiences and so on and so forth, there's a certain level of dysfunction that we come from, right? And so, like, when you envision your household, when you envision your marriage, you envision, you know, how your kids are going to be, right? You obviously don't factor in the mental or the things that you were taught that you don't know were wrong, or you don't know were dysfunction, or you don't know that that's not how you're supposed to treat a kid, you know? So how do you, like, what's a good, like, red flag, or what's a good, you know, what are some things that like, obviously, you know, I came from a household where, you know, some of the things that my dad did, I mean, today would be like a no-no, right? That would be child abuse.
Get arrested.
Exactly. The people would call the police, like, okay, come get him. But, you know, and that's just how I was raised, right? And that's how I knew that, you know, don't get that angry, you know? But, like, how do you differentiate? Like, what is, like, what's a good guideline?
Right. Well, so I'll work from this one story, and then work backwards on her. My kid, when we first started seeking healing, so we went out to Colorado with a group of like 4 other people from North River. We went out to Colorado to a thing called Restoration of the Heart by John Eldridge and Dan Allender. I don't know if you guys know who John Eldridge is, but it was this conference. It was a 2-day conference, and it was all about healing, and it was kind of bringing the two worlds together of healing prayer and Christian psychology. It was really, because they can be at war with each other. Like, it's all about healing prayer, and no, it's all about Christian psychology, you know, but to really combine those things. And so that started on a real journey of a lot. And I remember reading Fathered by God by John Eldridge. I don't know if you've heard of that. But I remember after really experiencing some healing myself, I remember buying 2 copies of it and sitting my sons down and sliding it over to them and saying, I'm really sorry. You know, I'm really sorry. I didn't know this stuff. And so just like how we started this, we were talking about seeking your own healing, like going into your own story. And so Fathered by God is good. The Restoration of the Heart, if you want to reach out, we've got a lot of resources we could connect you with. We could go into more detail about, you know, our stories of healing. But the best thing you can do for your kids is to consent to God healing you, because he won't rush in, you know, and Revelation 3:20 says he knocks. He doesn't break down the door. And he's not gonna, most of the healings that we see in the New Testament is because people came to him. He didn't go breaking down the doors, trying to find people, or go into where the groups of hospitals or anything were. He let people come to him. Sure. And I think we have to, that posture will help us be invested in our emotional and spiritual healing, and to really to look at our story, the individual stories maybe. I remember being on a grand jury in Marietta. I had to be on the grand jury for like 3 months. I was an alternate. But I remember calling my sister and I said, hey, you know those things that we went through when we were growing up? There's a name for them. Felonies. The violence that we saw between my parents, actually, if there's a child that's witnessing it, they can be charged with assault against the child. That's what the law is now, that if a child observes an assault, the assaultee, the assaulter can be charged with assault against the child, even if it wasn't against them, because they were there. And so my sister and I had a nice little laugh over that. Yeah, felony. That's what those were. But to get healing for those things in our stories, and it could have been, and it doesn't have to be that dramatic. I mean, I've got some dramatic memories, but I mean, it might have been a very sensitive young woman just being overlooked, you know, or all the focus being on a sibling, you know, and so maybe they felt not seen or whatever. So the world's a brutal place, you know, I mean, the fallen world. And so none of us comes out without some wounds. And I think as you're healing, as you're experiencing the healing and wholeness, then you're going to be in a much different position. Just being being a apprentice of Jesus is, you know, you've already made some changes that aren't going to go back. But I do think it's important to go back and be healed, because from a place of healing, you're not going to inflict those same wounds.
That's such a humble question.
Yes, so good.
And I think we don't know what we don't know, you know, because if we're brought up in a certain way, that's totally normal for us.
Exactly.
So sometimes it could be even asking people that you feel safe with, but how do you see me in this relationship? Or if there are certain patterns that you're aware of, dialing back, why am I reacting this way to this? Where do I feel resistance? When does my temper flare up?
Okay.
Learning about, I mean, so much that we've gone through, learning that anger more often than not is a secondary emotion, not the first emotion. There's usually hurt or fear, maybe first. So there's a lot of self-awareness, giving yourself the space and permission to look inside. Doesn't have to be navel-gazing, doesn't have to be selfish, but it's a place to bring God to show me who I am. Where are those broken places in me that you want to heal? You know?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to be here with you guys.
We're so grateful that it worked out. You guys were able to be with us.
Yes.
This is really great. The people online should be #blessed. Next class is going to be Saturday, July 16th, I believe. Same time, same place. And hopefully this time we're going to try again to do the I in marriage, which is the topic that is going to be talking about, like, even though, yes, we are one, how do we keep our own sense of individuality inside of a marriage? And in what ways can we do that? So I'm excited about that topic.
Yeah.
We just got to find somebody to do it. So if you have any ideas, let us know. But that's going to be July 16th. So put that in the calendar. But yeah, we appreciate you all coming.
Yes.
Feel free to
Thank you.
hang out, fellowship.
Yeah.
Thank you.